Good morning, everyone. I meant to show this and talk about this yesterday. This is the former anthem singer for the Vancouver Canucks, and he was asked to sing "O Canada" at a protest, and he agreed, and then he got fired. And there are a lot of people in this crowd. I feel like if I play this, we're gonna have to stand, and it's gonna be a whole thing. So I'm not gonna play this whole thing. I'm just gonna show you the crowd. There's a lot of people here, right? And it's very. It's a good rendition. Go watch it. Go watch it. I was going to play the whole thing, and I did it. I listened to it once, and I thought it was good. I thought it was really good. It brought me back to high school and just kind of having to stand there because we didn't sing the anthem. We listened to a version of the anthem. And, there's a lot of hockey games I've watched and listened to the national anthem. There's a lot of days in high school that started with "O Canada." And it's nice to see so many people standing on guard for Canada now. And I don't know where this is going to go. I don't know where this is going to go. If organizations are firing people for singing the national anthem in company they don't like, we're in real trouble here in Canada. Real trouble. Real trouble. And yesterday, I people kind of commented on this. I took the kind of funny, please send me your ideas take on this. This is a very, very serious reach into people's bank accounts. The locked up, what did she call it? Hold on. Preloaded stimulus. And I'm going to play a bit of this clip. Oh my goodness. I'm going to play a bit of this clip. Theo Fleury says, "Okay, people, have you had enough yet? Now they want your savings after a pandemic to stimulate the economy. These criminals want everything you have. More higher taxes coming. Total and complete control. Better wake up and wake up soon." There are a lot of people who are concerned about Ms. Freeland's very, very, very scary comments from yesterday. She's proposing communism, right? And the richest people who have enriched themselves or whatever, aren't being targeted for this. It's our bank accounts, our savings, right? That's the preloaded stimulus. Now, I don't like the rhetoric of eat the rich, right? I don't like Jagmeet Singh's communist rhetoric of they're the ones who are to blame and we should get them and get their money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's not how things work because there's an incentive and the incentive drives business and the business drives jobs, right? So the incentive is money, right? And taxes work until they don't anymore, right? But communism doesn't work. And what she's proposing here is very frightening. I'm going to replay some of this because it's important, and then we're going to have a further dive into, well, here's a tweet that I thought clearly explained Miss Freeland's little speech here. It says, "The Canadian economy is like an out-of-control bus racing downhill with the throttle stuck wide open, the brakes malfunctioning, and the cliff of bankruptcy looming. But don't worry," the driver just asked, "does anyone know how to drive this thing?" Hashtag Care Freeland. Okay, here we go.
First of all, for really zeroing in on the preloaded stimulus idea, none of us have a crystal ball. But economists like Ben, like Doug, have been pointing out that some Canadian households, and it tends to be the better off households, do have quite a lot of money that they've saved because there hasn't been that much to do in the pandemic. And certainly it would be great if that money could go towards driving our recovery. And I want to make an offer now to all of your listeners. If people have ideas on how the government can act to help unlock that preloaded stimulus, I am very, very interested. Maybe as
So there's lots of red flags. Unlocking the stimulus, saying that there are lots of Canadians who've got lots and lots of money saved up because there hasn't been that much to do in the pandemic. Now that's true to a certain degree. You can reason that out. We didn't get to do our usual trip to Newfoundland this year because apparently moving between Canadian provinces is currently illegal. You're not allowed to do that unless you're willing to quarantine for 14 days. And who's got time for 14-day quarantine and a vacation, right? Like if you get there and you can't do anything for 14 days and then you get on a plane and then you have to quarantine for 14 days on the back end. Does that make a lot of sense? I mean, in light of some other information that I've got, it really doesn't. But further than that, unlocking all of that money to drive the recovery is, what exactly is she proposing here? That you open up your wallets and do tons of renovations and retrofits to hire lots of construction workers, etc. But what if that's not the jobs that need refilling? What if the jobs that need refilling are trucking jobs or whatever, right? Like there's a lot wrong with the fiscal policy. And there's a lot wrong with Ms. Freeland and her asking everyone for an idea. During times like these, it's not exactly great to seem like you don't know what you're doing. And I mean, she's not experienced. She's a journalist, right? Like she's not the financial acumen. One of the longest, the deputy minister who just left is a long-serving deputy minister, somebody who's been instrumental in, I think he was around in 2008 or just after the 2008 crash, and, crafted the Canadian economy from then to now. And, after the 2008 crash to 2015, the economy was pretty strong. We had a surplus. After 2015, Justin Trudeau was spending a lot, but we still had a deficit of $40 billion. And federally, we were pretty strong. Provincially, in Ontario anyway, we had a very large debt deficit, 300 billion odd, but 350 billion really. But that was manageable with the low federal debt because, the taxes could be kind of balanced that way. But now we're just off our rockers, right? We've got a federal debt of over $1 trillion, a deficit of 300 billion plus, and the provincial deficit to contend with as well. And there's only one taxpayer, right? And I don't mean to diatribe on this, but I kind of left. I didn't go in depth in this story, and I feel bad about that. So anyway, it's very concerning. It's very concerning, and it's not just me, right? It's not just me who says that. Somebody says toenail picker Justin Trudeau wants not Justin Trudeau, Care Freeland, right? She likes to pick her toes in the House of Commons, right, with her dress on, which is very strange. Anyway. Wants our savings now. Where's my mattress? People alluding to hiding their money from the government. And Exactly says serious about leaving. Take note, people. This is the subtle beginnings of government moving in on your pension funds, savings, and bank accounts. First, it comes slow and then a little faster. Then, boom, universal income will replace any need for savings or pensions. It'll be wonderful. You'll have nothing and you'll be happy. Right? Because you're not in competition. Everybody gets what they need, and it's, everybody just stands in line to wait their turn, and you get money from the government, and, everybody will be happy, right? There's a couple of question marks there, but you just trust them because they haven't messed anything up previously. On to other mess ups by the government. Andrew Coyne says, even Kevin Page, actually this is the same mess up. Kevin Page, who served as a parliamentary budget officer for 5 years, says he can hardly make sense of the recent 223-page fall economic update, saying an evening spent passing its charts, graphs, and verbiage left him feeling like he had a hangover. Yeah, it was a tough read. Moving into the coronavirus and other things that they've gotten nothing but wrong, like our federal government response has been nothing but wrong from the coronavirus standpoint. This is a guy from Ireland, and he says, what have Ireland and Florida got in common? This is a comparison between Ireland and their strict lockdown and Florida and their lack of lockdown, and it's a good video, and it's very succinct. So here he's talking, this is about 15 seconds in, and he's talking about how the October 17th date, you see the curve starting to peak and fall, and then he tells you when the lockdown came in, and it didn't change anything. So here, I'll let this run for a little bit, and then I'll show you this infographic here, staged pandemic versus a real pandemic, which I think both are valuable. Here we go.
On the 17th of October, curled over and started coming down steadily. But the full lockdown in Ireland, which was brought in, would have started impacting here at best. Zero impact on the curve with the full shutdown and 100,000 jobs lost. Hospitals, 21st of October, things curled over. The lockdown might have impacted here, but nothing happened. A complete waste of jobs and a destruction of society for nothing. ICU confirmed cases, same story. No curve change, utter anti-science. Let's look now at Florida. The Florida governor lifted all restrictions and banned mask fines, and he's held to it ever since. What happened to the death rate? Well, there you go. And you can see the other regions of America, and Florida is no different after banning all the lockdowns and the mask stuff. Also, if you look at the data, the most locked down 10 states are all worse than Florida for cases, for hospitalizations, and for deaths, pretty much. So lockdowns and masks proven again and again to do nothing.
Right. So what are we doing? Why do we keep repeating the same mistakes over and over at every single level? It's very interesting that lockdowns are the only solution our leadership has at this point in time. Look at high regions or hotspot regions, Peel and Toronto. Their only options are lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. And what have we got else? Vaccines, right? I'll show you the problem with that. First, here's Brian Lilly. I think this is very strange, and I've noticed Brian Lilly doing this a bit. Often, actually. He says, I keep hearing that Ontario will force people to take a COVID vaccine or have their movements restricted. That's utter BS. Dr. Williams said clearly, we can't force someone to take a vaccine. That's clear. His comments were about visiting a hospital or long-term care. See below. What he said, and I think it was very clear, is right here. And he starts at 20 seconds. He says, we can't force people to take a vaccine, but what we can do is limit their movements.
We can't force someone to take a vaccine. That's clear. And because we want to make sure that people say they only would want it. And we want to make sure we have all the information they need, as well as all the safety information, etc. What we can do is to say sometimes for access or ease in getting into certain settings, if you don't have vaccination, then you're not allowed into that setting without other protection and promote materials. So what may be mandatory is proof of immunization or vaccination with a proper product in order to have latitude and freedom to move around in certain, like to access into long-term care facilities or the hospital, different things, without wearing other types of form of personal protective equipment, etc. Same as with school attendance. It may be much like our other vaccines. We haven't gone there yet, but we would make it mandatory for access in, and sometimes being excluded if there's a risk or a hazard going on. So it's more of
So it's not a mandatory vaccine, but to get access to hospitals, schools, or long-term care, you have to be vaccinated or proof of vaccination, or you have to wear PPE, etc. So is the option to wear PPE? Can you just continue to wear PPE? Or are the exemptions going to be accepted? They're currently not accepted. You can't go into Costco without wearing a mask. Is that going to be up to the Costco as well? They can demand vaccination proof in order to grant entry? What about Chapters? They're doing the same thing as Costco, completely fine. Nobody seems to care about it. As well as other small businesses putting up signs that says no mask, no service. So are we, when I hear that, I don't hear these vaccines are not going to be mandatory, it's going to be your choice. I hear these vaccines, we can't mandate them, but we can make it darned uncomfortable for anybody who wants to move around in society at all. Anybody who's got a parent in long-term care, anybody who's got a child in school, if the child is attending school, anybody who's sick and needs access to a hospital. So how is that not mandatory? How is that not completely against the charter rights? Like you can't make it mandatory in every way but making it mandatory. Like, oh, well, we didn't say you had to take it. We just said you had to take it if you wanted to have access to these things. Right. Oh, you want your paycheck? Well, you have to do this, but you don't have to do this. Right. Sure. Not mandatory. So, maybe Brian Williams can listen to what Dr. Williams says and take it at complete face value. He is only talking about long-term care in hospitals and schools. That's it. That's all he was talking about, according to Brian Lilly. According to me, I think you would be foolish not to extrapolate and say, look at what happened with masks. Can you be certain that the vaccine is going to stop spread of this disease? I'll show you in just a minute. They can't because they're not. And if the vaccine doesn't prevent spread of this disease, what is the point? What is the point? I had an argument with somebody on Twitter this morning about this because it was very, very, very silly. And if you are creating a vaccine that creates an immune response, like it's your body that generates the immunity, I think, right? I think I could be wrong. So having the vaccine, it's supposed to stimulate your own body's response. But if it doesn't stop you from spreading the vaccine, and it's in a couple of tabs that I get to the vaccine spreading, et cetera. There's a couple of things I want to get to before that. But if the vaccine doesn't stop the spread of if the vaccine doesn't stop the spread of the virus, then how are we getting to the point where people are going to have free access to hospitals, schools, and healthcare when unvaccinated won't, when the vaccine is just about symptoms? I don't get it. Okay. This is a long 15-minute video. It's worth the 15 minutes. This is a healthcare worker. The speech was written by healthcare workers in Calgary. It was written down and delivered by this person who's independent. I think that she's independent. I don't believe she's a representative of the group. I think that she's just a person. Well, she's a representative of the group in that she's reading their speech, but she's not from the group representing the group. It's not like, I'm Jerry, the head nurse, part of all of these nurses, right? Like that's not happening here. But she reads the speech. And let's see if I can get a highlighted part. Hold on. Okay, I'll play this until it stops making sense to play it. She's explained that they're healthcare workers. They want to share what's happening in their hospital. I think that's what she says right here.
In the ICUs, wards, and throughout the hospital, we stand with you, as some of us have been doing for some time now. We want to share our story about what is happening at our hospital. Back in February, nearly 1 year ago, we were told we were entering what would be a worldwide medical pandemic, the likes no one in our lifetime had seen. There would be patients coming in droves. ICUs would be overflowing. They would put patients in hallways and cafeterias. We were told to prepare for the worst. We wouldn't be allowed to see our families if we were stationed on COVID units. We were asked to recruit all and any relief staff, friends, retirees. Extra bodies were needed in every department. Everyone was afraid, and no one knew what to expect. Management told us the wave of patients would hit the hospital at any moment. We cancelled surgeries, blocked beds, discharged patients early, and revoked access to many necessary services. Our managers and the higher-ups again told us the wave is coming. It never came. They said the wave is coming in March. We are expecting 500 COVID admissions. March came and went. The patients did not.
And that's the same story everywhere. I've been monitoring Guelph's hospital situation, and we're still one person in hospital for COVID. This is a doctor explaining what happens when you get a vaccine that looks like you get a strong response from your body, so it looks like you get a strong antibody response, but then when you get exposed to the actual virus, you get much, much sicker. And there was a dengue example in 2014 that he references that killed a bunch of children. And he references a trial of ferrets as well, and another trial from the 1960s. And it's a well-known situation that could develop when you're developing vaccines, and he talks about this, where you can see this strong immune response, but when you're introduced to the actual virus, you get much sicker. And he says that there's a lot of potential for that right now with the current rollout of the coronavirus vaccine. And so they're saying, and there's two parts, watch them both. I'm not going to play them here, but that's kind of the too long didn't read, but it's worth watching both of them. Here's another one. Some thoughts on the vaccines for SARS-CoV-2. Trials for the current vaccine candidate would appear to have been designed to detect a reduction in symptoms only, as summarized here. This is what I was talking about earlier. If the vaccine is not designed to reduce your ability to spread the disease, then the idea that this is going to return us to normal is as false as the PCR tests and as false as the death data, okay? Which is all faulty. It's not based in reality at all. Anyway, back to this. Trials for the current vaccine candidates would appear to have been designed to reduce symptoms only, as summarized here, okay? So that's in a Forbes magazine, or in Forbes. I'm not going to read it right now. None of the companies are claiming any reduction in the propensity to become infected. For example, Pfizer's CEO is careful what he says here. Not certain, Pfizer CEO, on if the COVID vaccine stops transmission. That's Business Today, India. Okay? I'm not going to read that either. This would make these vaccines like those for the flu. They reduce severity. That's a worthy aim in and of itself, as it's likely to reduce the mortality burden in vulnerable groups, but it seem it's not something being recognized by most people. There are plenty of commentators saying that there are moral obligations to be vaccinated to protect older people. We have calls for bio passports, vaccination certificates, and so on. Such demands rely on vaccines reducing transmission, but we don't even know if they reduce infection, let alone transmission. But people might reasonably say it's a respiratory virus. It's spreading via It's spreading via droplet secretions, which are generally correlated to symptoms. In other words, it's like every other respiratory virus in that regard. So reduced symptoms and transmission will be reduced. That sounds logical, but it's the opposite of what proponents of lockdown have been arguing. The justification for lockdowns rests on asymptomatic transmission being a major contributing factor to the pandemic. So let's pretend they and we are right. What will a vaccine which reduces symptoms do? Won't it shift people from being symptomatic to asymptomatic? How will they know to self-isolate? Not by testing. They don't even know if they need a test if they feel okay. So which is it? One, a reduction in symptoms will assist managing the virus, as most spread is associated with symptoms, in which case what is the point of the lockdowns, restrictions, and over self-isolation of those with symptoms. Or two, a reduction in symptoms will not assist managing the virus, as asymptomatic spread is a major factor. If so, as described above, whilst welcoming the extra protection afforded to the vulnerable, it's illogical to view vaccines as a prerequisite to get life back to normal. The conclusion to this is that once vulnerable groups have voluntarily been vaccinated, all restrictions to society must end. This is essential to cease the enormous ongoing collateral public health and economic harm being done to society. By the way, if your answer to this is moonshot, have you thought about exactly what that would end and at what cost? Do people really think that would be worth it, having vaccinated the vulnerable? Moonshot being, I think, vaccinating everyone. Here's Lori Goldstein saying the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine could ship to Canada within 24 hours of approval. So yay, we'll get the vaccine very quickly, except here's former Pfizer VP and Science Director Dr. Michael Yeadon filing an urgent application with the EU Medicine Agency calling for suspension of all COVID-2 vaccine studies, particularly the BioNTech Pfizer study. And here is that legal filing, okay? Petition motion for administrative regulation action regarding confirmation of effective endpoints and use of data in connection with the following clinical trials. Phase 3, blah, blah, blah. Sponsor protocol, BioNTech, right? And ongoing trials of candidates to stop the transmission of the virus from the vaccine recipient to others, blah, blah, blah. Here are a bunch, this is who Dr. Mike Yeadon is. Yeadon, I don't know if I've said that right. You may have seen him before. Politicians are not prioritized for early COVID vaccine dose. Isn't that interesting, right? We've really based our priorities on burden of illness. So people who have died most of the disease or have been most touched with complications and frontline healthcare workers. I can't imagine people who have died most of the disease would get the vaccine. I think that like people in the group, right, in the vulnerability group, but not the people who have died most, because that'd be a waste of vaccine, wouldn't it? Anyway, as well as indigenous communities and remote communities. Why would remote communities get it? Like the hotspots are in Toronto and Montreal. You know who needs it? Northern Manitoba. Political leaders are not part of these groups, said Dr. Caroline Kwan Than, chair of the National Advisory Committee. That's not shocking. Here's a video. It's called Ask the Experts. It's, I guess, 28 minutes of doctors who are saying, this doesn't seem like a good idea. I wouldn't take this vaccine. Don't take this vaccine. Okay. This should have been earlier. This should have been right after this story. It should have been right after the reduction in symptoms argument, but I digress. 100% of schools that strongly encouraged all students to get tested are closed. Take a minute and process that. A third school that did asymptomatic testing was just closed down too. Previously, it had 0 cases. Why aren't you publicly updating on this, York Regional Government? So here's the article. Thorncliffe Park Public School, first site of Ontario's asymptomatic school testing, closes as cases climb. The Toronto school that's the first site of the province's voluntary mass asymptomatic testing program has closed as cases climb. They closed the school. Toronto Public Health to close Thorncliffe Park PS over COVID-19 public health outbreak. Toronto Public Health has opted to close Thorncliffe Park Public School just days after a testing blitz revealed 19 cases of the novel coronavirus among students and staff, a number which has gone up since then. Based on the current situation, all students and staff at the school will be dismissed until at least Wednesday, December 9th, wrote Thorncliffe Park Principal Jeff Crane in a letter to the school's families on Thursday evening. The school recently became the first in the city to participate in a voluntary asymptomatic testing pilot project. The results released Sunday night found 18 students and 1 staff member who had the virus. Dun dun dun. Asymptomatic people running all around our city. Oh my goodness. Or how many people were tested? Around 400, and there were 20 people who had positives. Could that account for a false positive rate? How many people retest positive, right? The fact they closed this school and the fact that they're running to go with these asymptomatic tests, this is not about a virus. I hope people are waking up. I should have made that case a little bit better. I should have tightened that up. I apologize. I missed that. I thought they were back to back, and then when I carried on, I thought that there was less space in between them. However, I don't think it's responsible to start testing people who aren't sick. That's what asymptomatic means. They don't have any symptoms. They're just fine. Come on in here. Let me swab your brain for a quick second. And then you have coronavirus. Oh, that's news to me. I feel just fine. Yeah, we're going to close the school because you have coronavirus. Like, can you imagine what this is doing to kids and like people's just general anxiety levels? And not to mention small businesses. This is a small business person, and she's giving testimony to the HESA committee. And she's talking here about feeling anxiety for the first time in her life. What we're doing to our kids is wrong. What we're doing to our culture is wrong. What our leaders are doing to us is without permission, and they have to stop. They have to stop. Here's a small bit of this testimony. Here we go.
Highs in each of the lows. What I think I was identifying for the first time in my life as anxiety. I would have conversations with my husband and business partner, Mark, picking apart every daily update from our federal and provincial governments. If it wasn't on TV, it was on the radio, and it never left our brains. Even a couple of days ago, when we tried to disconnect from TV and radio and talking about the pandemic, we went shopping at Costco and noticed a flurry of shoppers on a Tuesday at 4 p.m. In our town, this is abnormal. And then immediately, we knew something must have happened on that daily update to cause some panic, and we had better listen to it to see how our worlds were about to change once again.
So constantly on your mind, constantly looking for new news, waiting for that daily update, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This isn't healthy to do to people. Constantly telling them they might be sick, testing people who aren't sick. This is not a healthy response. This is not something that we should be doing to people. And it is in line with something that I maybe forgot to talk about, but I'm going to talk about right now, as soon as I find it. In a real pandemic, everyone knows seriously ill people in their direct family or community. In a staged pandemic, cases are only known from media reports or other stories. In a real pandemic, hospitals and medical centers in the entire country are overrun. In a staged pandemic, short-time work and empty hospital beds increase numbers of worried patients in medical centers. I've seen videos of empty hospitals all over Canada, all over the West, all over the United States, everywhere. In a real pandemic, there are many, many dead people. In the staged pandemic, unchanged mortality rates compared to the previous years. Again, despite Brian Lilly saying that there are 6,000 extra deaths, the charts that I've seen have shown mortality rates in line with the last couple of years, and this year's mortality below 2019 levels. So that's interesting. In a staged pandemic, politicians create panic in order to intimidate people. In a staged pandemic, unchanged mortality rates compared to previous years. They compare to previous years this year. In a real pandemic, politicians and doctors do anything to calm people down. In a staged pandemic, politicians create panic in order to intimidate people. In a real pandemic, every helping hand is welcome during the emergency. People search for facts. In a staged pandemic, renowned scientists are being ignored and publicly ridiculed in the mainstream media. In a real pandemic, there are no organized profit takers. In a staged pandemic, negotiated deals behind closed doors lead to multi-billion-dollar profits. Where did that $7,000 go? Where did all that public health spending go to renovate offices and cafeteria spending? Right? In a real pandemic, everyone is striving for a fast end of the pandemic. Clear guidelines aim to communicate a timely all clear. In a staged pandemic, evolving insights, ongoing modification of requirements, and ever-changing rules and regulations extend the pandemic. In a real pandemic, people are afraid to die and do everything to protect themselves. Politicians try to enlighten and prevent any overreactions. In a staged pandemic, people are more afraid of punishment. Regulations are maintained by applying social pressure, enormous fines, and police enforcement. Have you heard of that recently? In a real pandemic, people are experiencing a humanitarian catastrophe. In a staged pandemic, people fight over toilet paper. Yeah, right. We're in a very interesting situation here, and it seems like, well, there's some very serious questions that need to be asked of our leaders and answered with very, very good answers. Holly Doan says, we need an advance ex-MP, that means member of parliament, he's an ex-Liberal MP too, I'll show you in a minute, testifies that Bayless Medical needed advance payment to meet the $237 million federal contract for pandemic ventilators. Frank Bayless says company remortgaged buildings and extended line of credit in weeks prior to winning the contract. And see, Bayless Media, company owned by former Liberal MP, awarded $422,000 contract. That's from True North. Very interesting. Trudeau government won't say who got billions of dollars in aid. Shocking, right? While some payments have been revealed, the destinations of billions of dollars in aid remain secret. They say that if they revealed who got the aid, that it's national security and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I don't know if I believe them. Pundit Class is saying, since April, I have referred 3 investigation files to the RCMP, and as of today, there are 11 files with the RCMP, federal lobbying watchdog. So things are being referred to the RCMP. It just doesn't seem like anything happens once they get to the RCMP, right? People don't seem to care. Unless you are holding church services, how dare you? Here's another Church of God, well, Pastor Henry Hildebrandt says, the Church of God near Steinbeck, Manitoba, I believe it's Manitoba, and the minister Tobias Tisson were charged with hosting and attending a drive-in church service this morning while parking lots at the liquor store, Walmart, and Costco were packed. I don't see how they can stand up to charter challenges. I don't think it's fair that judges sidestep addressing the charter challenges because the charter is supposed to underpin our rights. And if the underpinning of our rights is being sidestepped to enforce a health order, we've gone round the bend. Here's Sheila Gunn-Reid. She's a Rebel reporter, and she says, my email inbox is currently lit up by Christians who were fined in Manitoba for attending church today. My email was passed around as someone who could help. I swear I will. I will help fight every single one of these as ferociously as the first. Good for you, Sheila. Well done. People need a champion, and well done. I think that this is unbelievable and a violation of our basic rights. And when the judge says that there's no public good in holding a church service, somebody pointed out in the comments yesterday, and I'm sorry that I don't have your name, but I appreciate the brevity. Somebody pointed out that having a support network is like a cornerstone of the public good, right? Being able to lean on a church and a friend and a community of people who are willing to help that's outside of government programs, but who have resources and who are willing to lend those resources to keep people warm and fed and make sure that they're social and have people regularly visiting them and all that stuff. Like, these are important things, and they're the reason that the church is so important, right? Like, community is... Humans are a pack creature. Human sanity depends on other people. You have your sanity farmed out to other people. You ask them, hey, what do you think about this crazy idea? I've been thinking about, getting a peanut butter and jam sandwich. What do you think? And then other people are like, dude, yes, that's a great idea. Go do that, right? And so that's a bad example. But like, if you're working on a hard problem, you can work through that problem through thinking with your group, right? That's why we're pack creatures. That's why you can't just rely on yourself, because like, you bounce things around. That's how we learn. That's how we live. And if you are cutting it off, it's not fair. It's not fair because people can't articulate this. It's something that is so ingrained in us. You can't. It's like the reason that watching Pinocchio makes sense. And I realize I'm getting into Jordan Peterson stuff here, but like, there's some crazy things that happen in Pinocchio. He jumps into a whale, and then his father's in the whale for some weird reason, and he brings his father home, and everybody's cool with this, right? Like, but you watch this, and it makes sense to you, and that bears note. You can't explain why it makes sense to you, but it does make sense to you. And the reason it makes sense to you is it's the hero's story, blah, 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 blah. That's way beyond the scope of this podcast. But fundamentally, it's hard for humans to articulate what they need like that. It's hard for people, when their rights are violated this way, to say, no, you're wrong because my community is important. But all of those things make sense. Yes, people can articulate that, but it's felt. It's felt. That's the point I'm trying to make. It's felt. It's part of who we are, right? And this is bad. Very, very bad. So very concerning. So good job, Miss Gunn-Reid. Okay. Backlash from small businesses for the newly announced Skip the Dishes LCBO partnership. This was like I mean, hilarious. I saw that. I said, oh, that's not going to last long. Like yesterday morning, they announced, oh, you can order alcohol and skip the dishes. And then the next day, they're like, nope, not anymore. So yeah, the province quashed that because people were very, very upset. This guy bought, I'm just highlighting this because I think it's interesting. This guy bought an EV to replace his car, and he needs a battery. And the battery is $15,000, right? Leafs have been around for a long time. But the battery is $15,000, and they said in a few years it'll be $5,000, but for now it's $15,000 to get a new battery to keep the Leaf running. And otherwise, it's a good car essentially. But basically, the idea is it doesn't make sense for Nissan to fix these things. It makes much more sense for them to put him into a new Leaf and put this Leaf into the trash, right? So green technology, yeah. Have you seen Wall-E? Me too. Okay, here's the last bit of news out of the U.S., and I think that there's very interesting stuff going to happen. But who knows? Who knows? But I saw this being reported through smaller media the other day, and I waited because it wasn't verified, and it's being more verified now. But I think we're going to see some cracks for tomorrow morning. And I don't want to be, there's just some deadlines coming up, and the 8th is one of them. And they moved an important hearing till tomorrow morning at 8 or 7, early morning anyway. So very interesting. Who knows? But here's the little piece of news that I think is going to swing things in a different way. And once the momentum swings, I think things will happen relatively quickly and then people will be upset because I think it'll swing in a way that they're not. The main people who watch mainstream media aren't expecting. Okay, so here's the big news. The big news you need to hear about today is Ware County, Georgia. Dominion machines were seized. Equal number of Trump and Biden votes were forensically analyzed. However, the machines reported 87% for Trump and 113% for Biden. Should be 100% for both. Stay tuned. This is big. So they ran equal number of votes, 20 votes for Trump, 20 votes for Biden, let's say. And instead of getting 100 for Trump, 100 for Biden, they got 113 for Biden. So it favored Biden, right? So if this happens in one place, and I've seen other places that are reporting the same thing. I've seen voting machines showing up on blacked out school buses. I've seen voting machines, single voting machines being removed from one of the warehouses or one of the storage facilities and being given to the Trump team. I can't verify any of these stories. I don't know if they're true, but all of them have this in common. The Dominion voting machines are flipping votes. All of them say the same thing. And I don't know if they've all just been told to say the same thing. I don't know. But I can't imagine. This guy is a city councilman, youngest elected official in history of Marysville, Ohio. So not to say he's a very secure source, and not to say that he knows everything. But the more people who are tweeting that out, the more verifiable the story. So when I see people like that tweeting that out, I'm going to tell you about it because it's interesting. But it's still treated as who knows yet. We'll see. Here's another one. Breaking news, folks. I've had some documents that were gifted to me from a journalist and just got permission to burn everything down. Stay tuned. The FBI refused to investigate previous electoral fraud for starts. And so much more. Thread, watch for updates. So this goes through. Let's start with Dallas County, Texas in 2018. Pretty much what's happening right now happened to them. And there are receipts coming up. FBI and Texas AG refused to do anything. And Mitch McConnell didn't do anything either. Otherwise, we would not be here today. This was a sting. They let them do this. They let them do this to figure out exactly how they were going to steal the vote. And then that's why they let them get away with it in 2018. And in 2020, they let them do it again. And this time they're going to go to jail. That's what I think. Okay, so here's another one. Expert examination of the computer logs revealed that thousands of error codes for timestamp mismatch and votes exceeded ballots were overridden by the ES and S technician, etc. Read the rest here. So they destroyed the evidence before the 22-month retention date. Notably, litigation contesting the bond election has revealed covert destruction of the ES and S equipment, software and data storage devices used in the 2018 primary and 2018 general election in mid-July 2019. So very, very interesting thread. I'm not going to go through the rest of it here, but when we've got some interesting stuff, Dominion voting machines that were created by Hugo Chavez or by the CIA to help keep Hugo Chavez in power in Venezuela and then exported to other South American countries and maybe even Canada. And now we're seeing them being used across the states, and they're flipping votes to put in a historically unpopular Democratic nominee. And then we're seeing proof of basically the same stuff happening in 2018. Man, that's going to be interesting, isn't it? It's going to be very interesting. Very, very interesting. We'll see how this turns out. We'll see who's still standing on January 20th, 21. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. And have a wonderful, wonderful